This song is basically a horny teenager screaming "Sleep with me," and it hit number 5 on the charts. It opens with a guitar riff that could soundtrack a high school hallway. Stacked harmonies, a driving tempo, clean AM radio energy. Everything about the production signals innocent teenage romance. But then the chorus arrives, and it's not subtle. I never knew how much I needed you. Go all the way tonight. Eric Carmen later admitted he deliberately flipped the dynamic, framing the girl as the one pushing for more. That inversion made it feel mutual, even sweet. That's exactly how it slipped by. The sound did the lying. The harmonies were so lush, the arrangement so bright, that listeners absorbed the emotion before they processed the words. And by the time they did, the song had been on the radio for years. This one sounds like a village pub on a Friday night. Pete Townshend playing banjo style, a bouncy shuffle, sing-along energy, the kind of track you'd expect between a folk set and Last Orders. Then you actually listen to the words. Mama's got a squeeze box, Daddy never sleeps at night. The squeeze box is technically an accordion. Townshend later called the whole thing a dumb joke, because it is, but it's a very specific kind of joke, built entirely around rhythmic in and out imagery and a chorus that gets more pointed every time it repeats. It peaked at number 16 in America and number 10 in Britain after release in late 1975. Roger Daltrey always enjoyed watching audiences catch on mid-dance. The music hall arrangement did the work, cheerful enough that nobody stopped to decode it, familiar enough that it felt harmless. It wasn't. Here's something that surprises us every time we check our analytics. More than 90% of the people watching this video right now are not subscribed. 90%. These songs were everywhere, but people missed the meaning. We want to reveal more of this. That's why this needs to reach further. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell. Share this with one person who grew up hearing these songs. Now let's continue.
You know all my flavors are guaranteed to satisfy. Check this out. I gotta put Bam Banana, Dixie comes. All flavors and push-ups too. Under eyes.
Van Halen's debut is all speed and flash, until it suddenly stops and David Lee Roth half talks his way through an acoustic blues shuffle that sounds like a joke between songs. That's the trick. The joke framing hid everything. Ice Cream Man wasn't written as a gag. The original was recorded in 1953 by blues singer John Brim. In post-war blues tradition, everyday vendors served as sexual metaphors. The Ice Cream Man wasn't selling dessert. He was offering relief.
Don't worry about what your mama says, he told me. You make your living playing steel guitar.
Satisfaction. Something to cool you down when the heat got too much. Original audiences understood that immediately. Rock fans in 1978 did not, because it arrives mid-album as comic relief, buried between hard rock tracks, delivered with a grin. The context reframed the content entirely. Nothing was hidden. Everything was disguised. I got something for you. Sure to satisfy. The blues crowd already knew exactly what that meant.
Who likes ice cream around here?
This one didn't hint. It said it directly. Released in 1975, Miracles climbed to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became the biggest hit of the Jefferson Starship era. Marty Balin sang it like a late-night confession. Slow, tender, emotionally unguarded. It sounded like a dreamy love song drifting toward morning. And for most listeners, that's all it was. because the line, "When I Went Down on You, Girl," was cut from the radio edit, gone. The single version most top 40 stations played was trimmed down, and that moment disappeared with it. The full album version stretches out and leaves nothing to imagination. But the version people actually heard in their cars, at diners, at dances, was scrubbed clean. So the song lived as soft, romantic wallpaper for years. The arrangement encouraged closed eyes, not close listening. The edit did the rest. The title sounds classy, refined even. The kind of thing you'd see behind glass at a jeweler. It's not that. Released on El Loco in 1981, Pearl Necklace became an FM rock radio staple, spread purely by airplay, not pop crossover. Billy Gibbons kept his guitar clipped and dry. Dusty Hill and Frank Beard locked into a steady, unshowy groove. No wink in the delivery. No warning in the arrangement? That's exactly why it worked. ZZ Top played it completely straight. The title sounds decorative until you know what the slang actually refers to. And then the entire song lands differently. Every line, every pause. The genius is in the deadpan. There's no signal that you're supposed to catch anything. It just sits there in a blues groove, patient and matter of fact, waiting for the listener to arrive. Most didn't, not until someone told them. And it was impossible to unhear. This one's darker than most people remember, and most people love it. The riff is so instantly satisfying, so locked in from the first second, that the groove becomes the entire experience. You feel the song before you hear it, and that's the whole mechanism. Released in 1971 as the lead single from Sticky Fingers, Brown Sugar references slavery, exploitation, and sex in terms that aren't metaphorical. They're direct. Mick Jagger later expressed ambivalence about the lyrics, and the Stones quietly retired it from live sets in 2021. But for decades, it was a rock radio cornerstone, because the music is irresistible. The opening riff triggers something almost involuntary. Listeners were already nodding along before the first verse finished, and by then the brain had moved on, chasing the next guitar hit. The distraction was the song itself. One of the most effective hooks in rock history, hiding some of the genre's most uncomfortable content. Way down inside, woman, you need love. That's barely dressed up at all. But Led Zeppelin could get away with almost anything in 1969 because the music hit physically before it registered mentally. Whole Lotta Love opens with one of rock's defining riffs, thick, loping, deeply sexual in its own right. Robert Plant's vocal starts urgent and keeps climbing. By the time the song breaks into that extended psychedelic midsection, listeners weren't analyzing, they were experiencing. The lyric borrows directly from blues tradition, where this kind of language was expected, coded into the idiom. Willie Dixon, who wrote the underlying structure, understood exactly what he was working with. Led Zeppelin transplanted that language into a rock context, and the sheer force of the arrangement buried the content beneath sensation. You didn't hear Whole Lotta Love so much as absorb it, which is precisely why the words rarely registered.
Take off your shoes. I'll take off your shoes, girl.
This one benefits enormously from presentation. Most people encountered it through film. The slow, deliberate vocal, the sparse, smoky arrangement, Something about the context, the lighting, the scene, the cinematography signals artistic rather than explicit. So the explicit part slides by, but strip away the imagery and read the lyrics like a transcript.
Come back here, stand on that chair. Little woman.
It's a step-by-step instruction for a striptease, delivered by someone who wants control over every detail of the reveal. Take off your coat, take off your shoes. The song is methodical, patient. It's about tension, exposure, and the power of watching someone undress on command. Randy Newman wrote it in 1972. Cocker's version, roughened and drag slower, gave it weight that reframed the content as something sophisticated. 3 Minutes in Heaven isn't sophisticated, but when it's delivered in a certain register with a certain gravity, listeners hear passion and stop there. The tone is the cover.
They don't believe in this love of mine, but they don't know what love is.
It sounds like Aerosmith doing a fun retro detour. Loose, swaggering, a knowing nod to the blues records that built rock and roll. Easy to enjoy. Easy to not examine too closely. That's the disguise. Big 10-inch record was originally recorded by Bull Moose Jackson in 1952. In the blues tradition, the 10-inch record isn't referring to vinyl. It's classic double-meaning language. The kind blues artists used constantly to sneak past censors while making sure their actual audience understood completely. Aerosmith's 1975 cover lands the same way. Steven Tyler sells it as a comedy throwback, the band playing loose and retro behind him. Nobody in the room seems to be winking, which is exactly the move. Deliver the punchline deadpan, wrap it in nostalgia, lean on the genre's history as camouflage. Unless you already speak the blues idiom, the title stays innocuous. 10-inch record. Sure, of course.
Gonna find my baby, gonna hold her tight, gonna grab some afternoon delight.
Skyrockets in flight, afternoon delight. That melody sounds like a breakfast cereal commercial. Warm harmonies, a tempo that practically skips, vocals so clean they could air during Saturday morning cartoons. It won the Grammy for Best New Artist in 1977. It was everywhere. It is entirely about sneaking in daytime sex. The premise is straightforward. The narrator wants to move things up earlier because waiting until dark feels too long. That's the whole song. Starland Vocal Band delivered it with such earnest, sunlit enthusiasm that nobody questioned the content. The tone did all the work. Squeaky clean harmonies convinced listeners' brains to stop where the ears should have started. Once you hear what it's actually about and you cannot unhear it, the chipper energy becomes the joke. The wholesomeness is the cover story. Nobody was fooled exactly. Everyone just forgot to wonder. These songs didn't hide. They just relied on tone, delivery, and timing to do the work. A sweet melody, a cheerful chorus, a straight-faced groove. The music convinced you not to ask questions most people never did. Until now.